Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of Loomer Unleashed. I'm your host, Laura Loomer. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about how Ron DeSantis is now completely bought and paid for by donors of the Bush family, Liz Cheney, and Mitt Romney. You see, Ron DeSantis is struggling because, let's face it, he's just not that likable. Currently, national polls have him polling at single digits as he prepares to enter the second GOP presidential debate, which will be held at the Ronald Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California. In comparison, President Trump has a nearly 55-point lead over Ron DeSantis in national polls. And for this reason, President Trump doesn't need to attend the GOP debate in California and will instead be speaking to auto workers in Michigan on Wednesday evening. As President Trump has said on numerous occasions, Ron DeSantis is in desperate need of a personality transplant, and all the donor money in the world isn't going to be enough money to buy him the personality that he so desperately needs. But that isn't stopping Ron DeSantis from selling out to people like Mitt Romney and the Bush family and donors of Liz Cheney and the funders of the January 6th political witch hunt. Now, every single time President Trump travels to a new location, whether it's Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, you always see tons of video footage and tons of photographs of President Trump interacting with his supporters. Because President Trump has charisma. President Trump has the it factor. He doesn't need to hide awkwardly behind his staff or behind gated communities in the homes of his millionaire and billionaire donors away from his supporters. But in comparison, that's exactly what Ron DeSantis is doing. You see, last week, Ron DeSantis decided to skip the entire week of work as governor of Florida. And the week before that, you guessed correctly, Ron DeSantis also skipped work so that he could attend numerous swanky New York City and Greenwich, Connecticut-based fundraisers on his 45th birthday. But you probably didn't even know that Ron DeSantis was in New York or that he was in Connecticut or that he was in Texas because there's no photographs or videos to document his visit. There's no photos that show him interacting with the public because Ron DeSantis cannot interact with people. You see, every single time Ron DeSantis interacts with the public, it goes terribly wrong. You either have his wife, Jill, rambling on and on and on about their uncontrollable toddlers, or you have Ron DeSantis wiping his boogers and his sweat on the arms of people who are asking him to take selfies. And no matter where he is, the discussion at the end of all of his trips is always, wow, Ron DeSantis is so awkward and he's not too good at this whole campaign thing. And now his advisors and the people that work for the Never Back Down Super PAC are also telling Ron DeSantis to stay out of the public eye because every single time the American people get to see Ron DeSantis or get to know him a little bit better, they come to dislike him that much more because he's just not a likable guy. Personality aside, when you look at the FEC reports and you look at the invites for some of these fundraisers that Ron DeSantis attended and you see some of the donors who are hosting these events, you come to see why the American people dislike Ron DeSantis so much. And it's because he's been completely bought and paid for by the GOP establishment donor class. Ron DeSantis isn't America first. Ron DeSantis isn't fighting for the average American worker. No, Ron DeSantis is fighting to be a puppet for the GOP establishment, and he's doing the bidding of his millionaire and billionaire donors who are trying to purchase access to the White House by giving Ron DeSantis and his super PAC large financial contributions. 2 weeks ago, Mitt Romney announced that he won't be seeking re-election to the United States Senate. But how does this pertain to Ron DeSantis? Well, oddly, the same exact week that Mitt Romney said he wouldn't be running for re-election, he was spotted at the Palm Beach International Airport, and then suddenly, all of his biggest financial backers from 2012 when he ran for president decided to host high-dollar fundraisers for Ron DeSantis. On his 45th birthday, Ron DeSantis attended 2 fundraisers in New York City. The first fundraiser was hosted by William A. Burke, a prolific Mitt Romney donor who contributed over $27,000 to Romney's failed 2012 presidential campaign through various avenues. After his breakfast fundraiser, Ron DeSantis then decided to attend another luncheon fundraiser hosted by Emil Henry, a longtime GOP fundraiser who was an advisor to Senator Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign. In addition to working with Mitt Romney, Emil Henry also worked as the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury during President George W. Bush's administration. The reason why you're not seeing any photos or videos from Ron DeSantis' fundraisers in New York City and Greenwich and various cities in Texas is because he doesn't want you to see that he has decided in his desperate attempt to try to take out President Trump ahead of the 2024 presidential election to unite with and align himself with the biggest swamp monsters in our country and the most hated GOP establishment politicians on the face of the planet. I'm talking about people like the Bush family and Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney and even radical Democrat Jamie Raskin. After leaving his birthday fundraisers in New York City and Greenwich, Connecticut, Ron DeSantis decided to go to Texas for a multi-day fundraising blitz where he was rubbing elbows with people like former Congressman Lamar Smith from Texas, who happens to be one of the contributors to Jamie Raskin, the lead impeachment manager during the second impeachment of President Donald Trump, and also one of the members of the January 6th committee. How is Ron DeSantis expecting to go to Washington, D.C. and break up the swamp when he's fundraising with and rubbing elbows with the same people who are funding the swamp, who are members of the swamp, and who are enablers of the biggest, most authoritarian figures in our swamp? Ron DeSantis isn't going to break up the swamp. Ron DeSantis is the swamp. But you don't even need to take it from me. Look at the names of the members of the host committees on the various invites for his fundraisers in Texas, and then do a cross-reference on the FEC website yourself, and you will see who these people have donated to. Some of the more well-known members of the host committee of Ron DeSantis' fundraiser include the Zeidman family, Jay Zeidman, Anat Zeidman, and Fred Zeidman, who decided to host a fundraiser for Ron DeSantis in Houston, Texas. Not only are the Zeidmans associates and advisors of George W. Bush, but according to the FEC, Jay Zeidman has also contributed thousands of dollars to Liz Cheney's super PAC. Another reason why Ron DeSantis didn't want to post any photographs from his Texas fundraisers is because most of the people who are on the list as host committee members for his fundraisers were supporters of the impeachment of Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. How can Ron DeSantis say that he's the anti-establishment, anti-swamp candidate when he is being funded and propped up by the worst swamp monsters and swamp creatures in our country? Ron DeSantis knows that he has no shot at the White House, but he's continuing to waste everybody's time and everybody's money, and he's going to continue to do that at the second GOP debate in California this week because he enjoys wasting valuable donor resources. You see, if Ron DeSantis actually wanted a Republican to take back the White House and wanted to defeat Joe Biden and make sure that the Democrats didn't have 4 more years in the White House, then he would drop out and he would endorse Donald Trump. But what Ron DeSantis is doing is deliberate and strategic. Instead, Ron DeSantis has decided to soak up hundreds of millions of dollars of valuable GOP resources that otherwise could be used to fortify our election integrity and make sure that Donald Trump has enough funds to not only have ground day election integrity operations, but also funds to fight back with litigation against the deep state that is trying to persecute him in an election year. Don't expect Ron DeSantis to be held accountable for rubbing elbows with swamp monsters when he's on stage at the second GOP presidential debate in California this week. Instead, you can expect the media to insert California Governor Gavin Newsom as the next roadblock for President Donald Trump. You see, because President Trump is now leading Joe Biden by 10 points in national general election polls, the Democrats and the mainstream media and the RINOs and the Uniparty all want to distract you from the fact that their plan to convince you that Ron DeSantis was somehow Trump without the baggage has failed. They know that Ron DeSantis is never going to secure the nomination, so now they have to entertain the idea of Gavin Newsom running for president, which is why Fox News has now decided to host a debate between Ron DeSantis and Gavin Newsom. Why is it that Ron DeSantis is going to be debating Gavin Newsom on November 30th when Ron DeSantis is nearly 55 points behind President Trump in national GOP polls? It's because the mainstream media will do everything in their power to not admit the fact that President Donald Trump is the only viable candidate for president in 2024. And while the Republican Party has done nothing to address the election fraud of 2020, while the Republican Party has done nothing to file lawsuits addressing voter fraud or big tech social media censorship, what they are doing is continuing to waste hundreds of millions of dollars, and they continue to waste everybody's time in the most pivotal election of our lifetime by entertaining these ridiculous candidates for president who are nothing but a drag on the GOP ticket. The American people and Republican voters have already rejected the Bush family and the establishment GOP donor class. We did this in 2016 when we elected President Donald Trump, who then went on to become the greatest president in United States history. But instead of listening to the will of the American people, the Republican Party, people like Romney, McDaniel, and people like Ron DeSantis and all of these other GOP candidates are instead wasting your time because they don't seem to think that America's worth fighting for. Instead, they would rather risk America succumbing to an absolute communist takeover and allowing for Joe Biden to have 4 more years in the White House instead of admitting what is obvious to everybody with a brain. And that's the fact that President Donald Trump is the undisputed frontrunner in this GOP primary, and it's time for everybody to unite around him because as Ron DeSantis has learned the hard way, you can have all the Bush money in the world, you can have all the GOP establishment support in the world, but nobody likes a Bush and nobody likes a RINO. Ron DeSantis has had more than enough time to prove that he's a viable candidate for president, but despite the fact that he's had the support of Rupert Murdoch's entire media empire behind him, despite the fact that he's raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and despite the fact that he has the support of the GOP establishment and the donor class that has worked hand in hand with the Democrat Party to screw the American people over for decades, he still doesn't have what it takes to go up against President Donald Trump. At the end of the day, President Donald Trump will win the nomination. And when he does, Ron DeSantis will never again be elected to any political position in his life. He's done. Ron DeSantis has committed career suicide. As we head into the second GOP presidential debate this week, it's important for Republican voters to understand that Ron DeSantis represents an extension of not just the Republican establishment, but also the uniparty, the donor class, and an extension of what it means to be a career politician. In comparison, President Donald Trump represents the end of career politicians, the end of the uniparty, and most importantly, the end of Ron DeSantis. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure you subscribe to my Substack at lauraloomer.substack.com. Also, be sure you're following me on Twitter, Gab, Truth Social, and Getter at Laura Loomer. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's content, The Wellness Company. With the winter months approaching, you might find yourself getting sick with some type of flu, COVID-19, or some type of virus. But not to worry, that's where the Wellness Company comes in hand. The Wellness Company and their doctors are medical professionals that you can trust, and their new medical emergency kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy. Every American should have one in their medicine cabinet. This prescription medical emergency kit contains an assortment of life-saving medications, including ivermectin and Z-Pak. The medical emergency kit provides a guidebook to aid in the safe use of all these life-saving medications. This winter, be sure that you don't catch yourself unprepared. Don't be reliant on the broken and corrupt medical industrial complex and Big Pharma. And don't regret not acting today. Order the Wellness Company's medical emergency kits today and book your 5-minute prescription appointment. Be sure to visit the Wellness Company today at www.twc.health, and when you go to checkout, be sure to use code LOOMER at checkout to get extra savings of up to 10% off all of your medical and health products. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Loomer Unleashed.